I'm the boss around here. That's what Karen from the HOA screamed the day she saw me, a grown man in my own kayak, paddling across the water to the cabin my family's owned since long before she ever set foot in Willowbrook. You'd think she'd seen a pirate invasion, not a guy heading home after an evening paddle. Instead, she called the cops, ranted to the crowd about community property and trespassers, and had the nerve to accuse me of disrupting her precious fishing contract meeting, all while the deed to that cabin, the entire peninsula, and most of the shoreline sits in my name. I didn't argue, not out there in the open, not with the whole HOA crowd watching. No, I just paddled home, dusted off an old contract the HOA never bothered to read, and signed exactly where I knew it would hurt them the most. 3 days later, Willowbrook's big fishing events canceled. Tourism and revenue gone. Karen had no idea who she'd tangled with. I'm the kind of guy who always digs to the root, and this time what I found would blow apart everything she'd built, her image, her little empire, the whole illusion that she had any real control. And what happened next? Well, let's just say this neighborhood drama became the talk of the entire county with twists nobody saw coming. It all started late one afternoon, sun casting gold across Willowbrook Lake, my kayak gliding through mirrored water. My mind quiet after another day of wrangling code for clients who don't know a fishhook from a firewall. Grandpa Tom left me this place, a battered old cabin on a scrap of land so peaceful it feels almost sacred. He taught me to fish here, to respect the water, to look after the wild things instead of exploiting them. I never planned on fighting my neighbors, but as I got close to the dock, I spotted 50 or so people, HOA types, in their lawn chairs, clustered around a makeshift podium. Everyone focused on Karen, who was busy waving around charts about a tourism development project, minus $500,000, all thanks to a fishing contract. I'd heard whispers about commercial fishing, but seeing the numbers scrawled in bold letters, hearing Karen preach about revenue and amenities, well, that's when the alarm bells started ringing. She had the crowd eating out of her hands, selling them some dream of high-end lakeside living, conveniently forgetting the mess that comes when you start chasing profits instead of peace. But the real gut punch came when her gaze locked on me, still floating in my kayak. Her smile switched from salesman to shark in a split second. "Speaking of obstacles," she crowed, "we have an uninvited guest." Everyone stared, judgment heavy as an anchor. I just raised a hand, said sorry, just heading home. Didn't matter. Karen stormed to the dock's edge, heels clicking like a warning bell, and started talking about community standards and shared waterways. She had the crowd nodding along, all those folks who'd bought into Willowbrook for the security and the rules and the chance to feel superior, never realizing there was more to the story. Then with a flourish, Karen pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the sheriff," she announced, "to report trespassing and disruption of a legitimate community gathering." Now, I've learned the hard way that arguing from a kayak, especially when you're the one accused, only makes things worse. So I paddled back, heart-pounding, feeling like I was about to be tried and convicted on the spot. As Karen described me to the cops as an aggressive individual refusing to leave community waters, I caught a snippet of her presentation, environmental water adjustments, which I realized with horror was code for chemicals and fertilizers meant to boost fish counts, but guaranteed to poison the ecosystem Grandpa spent 40 years protecting. This wasn't about revenue. It was about turning a real living lake into a tourist playground. Sirens echoed as I tied up at my dock, and Karen was already marching over with a deputy posture, screaming righteous indignation. The cop, clearly no stranger to HOA nonsense, asked a few questions, checked my ID, then quietly told me, "You're not doing anything wrong, Mr. Caldwell. Just try to avoid the community dock during meetings." I watched Karen celebrating as I left, not knowing she'd just triggered something she couldn't stop. Back at the cabin, the air was thick with memories. Grandpa's rods on the wall, old history books, his leather chair worn smooth. But what drew my eye now was the chest he'd left in the corner, the one he'd only told me to open when someone tries to take your home. Inside were documents more than just the deed. There was a county contract from 1973, giving Grandpa exclusive rights to all commercial activity on the lake and clear instructions that these rights were hereditary and could be passed on. There were letters showing how Grandpa had turned down every attempt at development for decades, always fighting to keep the lake wild. But the final document sent a chill down my spine. A feasibility study from 1995 stamped Peton Construction, proposing to drain and refill the lake for a resort. At the bottom, Grandpa had written, "Denied. Some things are more important than money." Peton. That name stuck with me, but I couldn't place it. At sunrise, I emailed the HOA board, and Karen, all fishing operations were terminated immediately pending legal review. I attached the evidence and waited, watching the lake glow pink and gold. Karen predictably lost her mind. My phone exploded with angry texts and legal threats, and by 9, she had dragged half the neighborhood and a TV crew to the dock for a show trial. Her lawyer, Marcus Reed, held up evidence and painted me as an eco-terrorist polluting the lake. But then came the twist nobody expected. Jake Morrison, a quiet neighbor, stepped up. Turns out he's an environmental biologist. He publicly called Karen out, announcing that my cabin had one of the most advanced septic systems in the county, that the real danger came from her planned chemical treatments. The crowd shifted. Karen's voice trembled, and her story started to unravel. I paddled over, calm as I could be, holding up the water samples I'd taken that morning. "Let's test them," I said, "and see who's really polluting the lake." When the lab results came back, they proved my water was pure, but the main swimming area had dangerous phosphate and nitrogen spikes, exactly what Jake predicted. That's when Jake called voice urgent, asking me to meet him at the library. What he'd found in the archives shocked us both. The 1995 Peton construction project wasn't just a failed resort plan. Robert Peton, Karen's father, vanished that year with $2 million in community development funds. The missing money, a police report, and the fact Karen had been conducting underwater environmental assessments all pointed to one thing. The fishing contract was just a cover for her to search for the hidden loot. It gets crazier. Jake dug up financial records and discovered Karen had been skimming from the HOA for years. As we pieced it all together, my phone buzzed with a threat: "Stop interfering or you'll regret it." Some people end up like Robert Peton. Suddenly, this wasn't just about the lake, it was about a decades-old conspiracy. That night, restless, I decided to dive myself. With Jake on backup, we used Grandpa's maps to find a sunken concrete vault hidden right near my cabin. After a tense search, we cracked the lock using a date from the police report. Inside, cash documents, a microcassette, and a confession letter from Robert Peton. It turns out he'd been trying to gather evidence of corruption involving city officials and contractors, but realized too late they'd kill to protect their secrets. The money and evidence were meant for the community. Karen was supposed to redeem her father's name, not keep running from the truth. We photographed everything, resealed the vault, and surfaced only to find Karen watching us from the shore phone glued to her ear. That night, Jake's apartment got ransacked, files, computers, backups all gone. It was clear Karen would do anything to keep her secrets buried. So I called for a community meeting, invited the media, and prepped for war. The next morning, the community center was packed: neighbors, reporters, law enforcement, even the county attorney. Karen showed up with her legal team, but the old bravado was gone. I started with the evidence: financial records, inflated contracts, missing funds. Then I played Robert Peton's confession, his voice echoing through the hall, naming names, detailing the conspiracy. The room was silent as he explained the stolen money was meant to expose the crooks and return what was rightfully the community's. Karen broke down in tears, her whole story crumbling. "I told her your father was a hero. You could have honored him by telling the truth." The crowd erupted, demanding answers. The deputies moved in, the board stripped Karen of her position, and the county attorney announced formal charges. The fishing contract gone. The lake protected again. 3 months later, I stood on my dock watching the sunrise, the water clear and alive with fish. Karen was in prison. Reed lost his law license, and several officials and contractors faced arrest. The $8 million Robert hid in a Swiss bank accessed only after Karen's conviction was distributed back to Willowbrook. Half went as restitution, the rest to build a memorial center and create a conservation endowment. Jake became our environmental coordinator. The cabin is still my sanctuary, but now it's open to anyone wanting to learn about what it takes to keep a place wild. The best part Karen wrote from prison telling me she'd finally found pride in her family name was studying environmental law and planned to help protect places like Willowbrook after release. Turns out redemption isn't just a word, it's a choice. And as I paddle out in the evening, I remember what Grandpa said, some things matter more than money. This lake belongs to everyone who loves it enough to fight for it. Karen thought being the boss meant having all the power. She was wrong. The real strength lies in standing up quietly but relentlessly until the truth comes out. So what do you think? Was justice served? Would you have fought back? Drop your thoughts below, because in the end, stories like these belong to all of us. And sometimes the quietest voice is the one that changes everything.